Their laughter was sharper than knives, slicing straight through the music and rose petals at my cousin's engagement. My mother's voice, sweetly cruel, rang out so everyone could hear. "Did you bring your imaginary fiancé again?" My father laughed even harder, elbowing my uncle. "Maybe she made him up like last time." The guests howled, eyes flicking toward me like I was a walking tragedy, a pathetic fairy tale left unfinished. I clutched a cheap gift bag, heat scalding my cheeks, but I refused to drop my smile. "My name is Alyssa, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own family?" I stood still, breathing carefully, while their cruel words tore through my heart. My cousin beamed beside her glittering fiancé, soaking up praise, while I stood as the family embarrassment, the liar with a fantasy love story. Poor Alyssa, she always makes things up. She'll die alone. The music faded to a distant blur as I watched them, these people who claimed to love me, yet delighted in breaking me. But I held on to my silence, because inside my chest burned a secret so bright it felt like a sunrise. 20 minutes. That was all I had to wait. Their voices rose, ugly and triumphant, telling me I'd invented a man to feel worthy, that I was a lost little girl chasing daydreams. My aunt even dared to pat my shoulder, pity dripping from every syllable. "Maybe you'll meet a nice boy someday, honey." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the smile off her face. But instead, I kept standing there, a statue carved out of my own fury. And then it happened. A deep, thunderous roar shattered their giggles, sweeping through the garden with violent grace. Heads snapped up. Dresses whipped around their ankles. A helicopter, midnight black and monstrous, descended right behind the floral archway.
Gasps. Cries.
Someone dropped a glass of champagne. The blade slowed, kicking up a wild wind that scattered rose petals across the lawn like bloodied confetti. And out stepped a man in a perfectly cut suit, a king among insects, eyes cold and unflinching as he surveyed the shocked crowd. He walked straight toward me, stopping inches from my shaking hands, and smiled like he'd known me in every lifetime. Then he turned to my parents, voice sharp as a dagger. "She is my wife." The garden collapsed into a stunned, breathless silence. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the world had finally, gloriously, turned in my favor. I could feel every heartbeat pounding through my bones, rattling the parts of me they had tried so hard to break. The entire garden was frozen, stunned mouths hanging open. A breeze lifted the tablecloths, as if the earth itself couldn't believe what it was seeing. My mother's face went pale, lips parted in a silent question she was too afraid to voice. My father clutched the back of a chair, knuckles white, searching for some shred of control. But there was no controlling him. He stepped forward, my husband, with a presence so lethal and calm it stole the breath from every petty relative. His name was Logan, and every inch of him looked carved from quiet power. Tailored suit, cold blue eyes, a smile that could either soothe you or destroy you. He looked at me, letting the corners of his mouth lift, and then addressed the crowd as if they were peasants gathered to witness a coronation. "Forgive my late arrival," he said, voice rich and deadly. "I was detained in Manhattan. Nobody dared answer." Then, with deliberate grace, he snapped his fingers. 3 men in sleek black uniforms stepped from the helicopter, carrying polished wooden boxes, each marked with gold seals. "Please," Logan announced, turning to the stunned guests, "accept our gifts. A token of gratitude for sharing your celebration with my wife." Gasps tore through the crowd as the boxes opened. Diamond watches, solid gold bracelets, items so expensive they seemed to glow under the fairy lights. My father blinked, confused and desperate, eyes darting between me and Logan. "Wife," he stammered, voice breaking. "You married?" Logan's gaze sharpened like a blade.
"Yes."
"Months ago." My mother reached for my arm, shaking her head as if trying to erase the entire moment. "Alyssa, what is this? Who is he really?" I smiled, every scar on my heart stitched up by this single moment. "My husband," I answered, clear and unstoppable. The man you all claimed didn't exist. Logan slipped his hand around my waist, pulling me to his side with a protective pride that made me feel taller than the sky. One of the guests fainted. Another actually dropped their diamond gift, scrambling to pick it up. I let them all drink in the truth, savoring how it burned away their arrogance. And then Logan leaned down, speaking only for me. "Tell me what you want next," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "And I'll make sure you get it." I looked around at the family, who had feasted on my shame for so long.
What did I want next?
Everything. And they would be forced to watch me take it? They tried to recover, fumbling for their dignity among the rose petals still tumbling from the helicopter's blast. I watched their greedy hands clutch diamond watches they'd never dreamed of owning, their faces twisted between awe and humiliation. Logan stood beside me like a silent sentinel, his arm resting casually around my waist, daring anyone to question the truth. The weight of him, of us, felt like armor I'd been missing my entire life. My father stepped closer, swallowing hard. "Alyssa," he rasped, "why didn't you tell us?" I stared at him, and for the first time, I saw how small he really was. "You never asked," I said flatly. "You only ever assumed I was worthless." My mother reached out, shaky, as though trying to touch the diamond on my finger to make sure it was real. But Logan cut in, voice of velvet dagger. "You laughed at her," he reminded them, "in front of strangers. You mocked her dreams. Now you will live with the truth that she dreamed bigger than you could ever imagine." Her hand dropped, lifeless. The guests had gone from smirking to stunned, eyes darting between Logan's perfect posture and the helicopter still idling behind the arch. They were quiet now, afraid even to breathe wrong. Logan raised a hand, signaling to one of his men. A crisp folder was placed into my father's hands, and I watched my father's face collapse as he flipped through the documents. "What is this?" "Your debt," Logan answered smoothly. "Paid in full. You owe no one $1. But you also owe nothing. Alyssa is free of you." My father's knees buckled, but he caught himself. My mother stared, tears filling her eyes, but I felt nothing. No pity, no tenderness. Just a quiet triumph burning in my chest. "Alyssa, please," she whispered. "Don't do this to us." I stepped closer, letting her see every inch of the woman they'd tried to destroy. "You did this to yourselves." The air felt electric, like a storm had passed through and left everything raw and new. Logan leaned down, brushing his lips against my temple in front of them all. "Ready to leave?" he murmured. I looked around one last time. At the place I'd been belittled, the people who'd sneered at my hope. "Let's go," I said. Because for the first time, I wasn't the invisible girl with imaginary dreams. I was a woman who had conquered the impossible and walked away with the entire world in her hands. The moment we stepped onto the helicopter again, the wind tore through my hair like freedom itself. The garden shrank below us, all those shocked faces growing smaller until they were nothing but background noise. Logan's hand rested on my thigh, steady, grounding me. His eyes met mine with a calm certainty that made my breath catch. "You okay?" he asked. I laughed, a raw, broken laugh that tasted like release. "Better than I've ever been." He nodded, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. "You did that," he said softly. "You stood there and took back everything they tried to steal from you." I let those words wash over me. We soared above the city, the blades slicing the sky, carrying me higher than I'd ever allowed myself to dream. Down below, they would keep picking over the ashes of their illusions while I built something bigger, something mine. The helicopter touched down on a private rooftop. Logan helped me out, his grip sure, unshakable, as if he knew I might still be trembling inside. We stepped into a penthouse so breathtaking I could barely find air, a forest of glass walls, skyline glittering beyond, floors of white marble gleaming in the dusk. Logan turned to me, eyes searching. "Alyssa, listen. No one will ever question you again. You decide who you are from now on." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Why me?" I asked, voice cracking. His answer was instant. "Because you fought alone for too long. You deserved someone to stand with you. And he did. He always would. That night, he took me to a dinner that felt like something out of a billionaire's fantasy. Waiters in black ties, crystal flutes, music drifting through the candlelight. But I was no longer the girl who shrank away. I sat tall, diamond flashing on my hand, smiling at Logan like I'd finally remembered who I was meant to be. After dessert, he pulled me to a window overlooking the entire city. Tomorrow, he said, I want to take you back to their house. Not as a guest, as their benefactor. I frowned. Benefactor? He smiled, slow and sharp. You're going to buy that house. Then decide what to do with it. My heart stopped. Own the place where they humiliated me? I could feel something dark and powerful awaken in my chest, a hunger to rewrite every inch of that house with my name. Yes, I breathed as the city sparkled below us, because this was no longer their story. It was mine. The next morning felt like a battle drum, pounding through my veins. Logan arranged everything in silence, his phone flashing with numbers I couldn't even comprehend. Lawyers, brokers, contracts, all moving at lightning speed, like the universe was finally obeying me. When the paperwork arrived, laid out on a marble counter like a feast, I hesitated for a moment. My childhood house, where every shameful moment had been carved into me, was now a line item with my name at the top.
Mine.
Logan watched me, eyes steady. If you're not ready, say the word, he told me, gentle but unwavering. I took a breath, so deep it felt like pulling air straight from the sky. I'm ready. He nodded, pride shimmering in the small, rare smile that cracked his usually stone-cold face. And then I signed it. The house was mine. When we drove back, it felt like crossing a border between worlds. The street looked the same, chipped fences, peeling paint, small dreams suffocating behind picket gates, but everything inside me had shifted. I stepped out of the car first, Logan right behind me, an unmovable shadow. My parents were in the yard, pruning rose bushes that looked pitiful compared to the memories I carried. My mother's hands froze, pruning shears clattering to the grass. Alyssa, she stammered, voice trembling. I smiled, calm and unstoppable. Good news, I said, each word tasting like revenge wrapped in honey. I bought the house. My father paled, mouth working like a fish gasping for air. What does that mean? It means, I continued, eyes locked on his, you are no longer the owners. I am. He tried to protest, but Logan stepped forward, placing a legal notice into his shaking hands. You will have 30 days, Logan told them, voice merciless, to collect your things. My mother sank to the porch steps, tears spilling down her cheeks. You can't do this, she sobbed. We're family.
Family.
The word scraped like a knife against my ribs. You taught me what that word means, I answered, voice steady. And now, I'm teaching you what respect means. The garden was silent, neighbors peeking through their curtains, all of them watching as the girl they'd once mocked had come back with lightning in her veins. I turned toward Logan, who watched me with that proud, dangerous grin. This is just the beginning, I told him. And he nodded, eyes sparking. Then let's finish it, he said. Because my story wasn't over. It was only gathering strength. They tried to argue, tried to claw back any shred of control, but the truth was written in black ink on those papers, undeniable and final. I watched my father skim every line, his hands trembling, rage and defeat mixing on his face. Where will we go? My mother finally choked out, voice breaking as if I should feel sorry for her. I tilted my head, studying her the way they'd once studied me, like I was something embarrassing and worthless. That's not my problem anymore, I said quietly. You always told me to fend for myself. Consider this a lesson. Logan stood beside me, a calm storm. 30 days, he repeated, giving them no room to plead. They collapsed under the weight of it, the same weight they'd thrown on me for years. I watched them swallow their pride, because pride wouldn't pay the mortgage now. The neighbors stood in clumps, pretending not to listen, but I saw their hungry eyes, their curious whispers. Look at her now. Look at what she's become. And I wanted them to see. Every single one of them. Logan turned to me, voice pitched low so only I could hear. You don't have to keep watching this, you know. But I did. I needed to stand there, to burn the memory of their stunned faces into my bones. I had been the quiet girl, the silly daydreamer, the one who spun fantasies they loved to tear apart. Now I was the owner of their house, the woman with a husband who could buy and sell everything they valued, and more importantly, a woman who no longer needed their approval. My father opened his mouth again, but the words turned to ash in the air. There was nothing left to say. Logan offered me his hand, and I took it, steady. We turned and walked down the cracked path to the waiting car, the entire block watching, silent, powerless. I could almost hear my younger self in the back of my mind, the girl who once tried so hard to belong. I wanted to tell her, you were always enough.
They just couldn't see it.
Logan squeezed my hand. Where to now, Mrs. Collins? I smiled, letting the power settle into my bones like I'd carried it all my life.
Home, I said.
Because from now on, home would never again be where I was broken. It would be where I rebuilt. The weeks that followed felt like the final act of a play I'd waited my whole life to perform. Each day, I watched movers carry out the furniture my parents once guarded like treasure, packing up the chipped cabinets and stained carpets of a house that had been my prison. Logan stayed close, always calm, always watchful, making sure no one dared twist the story. The neighbors kept staring, half horrified, half jealous, as if they couldn't decide whether to hate me or envy me. I didn't care. I walked through every room like a queen surveying her kingdom, remembering the nights I'd cried into a cheap pillow, believing their lies. Not anymore. On the last day, my parents stood in the empty living room, small and brittle, holding a few worn suitcases. The walls echoed with a silence, so loud it hurt. My mother tried one last plea, her voice thin as paper. Alyssa, where will we go? I met her eyes, steady, unshaken. That's for you to figure out. Like I had to. My father flinched as if struck. He had no defense left, no money, no power. Just the truth. They stepped out the front door for the final time, and I watched, feeling no pity, only the calm satisfaction of balance restored. When they were gone, Logan wrapped his arms around me from behind, warm and protective. It's yours now, he murmured, his breath steady against my ear. What will you do with it? I looked around, remembering the ghosts of who I'd been, of every cruel word that still haunted these walls.
Burn it, I said.
Logan nodded, no argument, no surprise. Then we'll burn it. A demolition crew arrived hours later. I stood across the street, Logan's hand linked with mine, as the machines roared to life. Brick by brick, they tore it down. The house that had been their kingdom of cruelty crumbled like a cheap lie. The final wall fell, dust swallowing the garden where they'd once laughed at my imaginary fiancé. And in that moment, something inside me exhaled, like I had finally, truly, escaped. Logan kissed my temple, voice low and sure. No one will ever use that place to hurt you again. I leaned into him, fierce and light all at once. Because I was free, and they would never, ever forget who made it so. The lot stood empty, raw earth where my nightmares used to live, as if the world itself had decided to give me a clean slate. I stared at the bare ground, the memories gone to dust, and felt the strangest sense of peace blooming inside my chest. Logan stood beside me, solid as a promise. Any regrets? He asked, quiet. I shook my head. Not one, I answered. For the first time, the weight of their cruelty was truly gone. The house that held my humiliation, their mocking voices, their petty laughter, it was nothing now. Just rubble. Logan slipped something into my hand. A small silver key. What's this? I asked, frowning. He smiled, soft but unstoppable. A new beginning. The brownstone in the city is yours. Fully in your name. No strings. My heart jumped. Logan. He cut me off gently. I told you I'd give you the world if you asked. Tears filled my eyes, but they didn't feel like weakness. They felt like release. like the last chains snapping free. We drove to the new place together. A brownstone of warm brick, tall windows catching the afternoon light. When I stepped through the door, I knew instantly. This was home. My home. No ghosts lived here. No echoes of mocking laughter. Just possibility. Logan wrapped his arms around me in the empty hallway, his voice fierce and loving. Whatever comes next, we face it together. I nodded, breathing him in. Together. Because revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about rebuilding me. And I had. In the days that followed, I found myself smiling for no reason, free of shame, free of their harsh words. The girl they once called delusional was gone, replaced by a woman who owned her destiny and wasn't afraid to wear it like a crown. One evening, I looked in the mirror, the diamond on my finger flashing like lightning, and whispered to myself, "They will never break you again." Alyssa.
Wife.
Survivor.
Queen.
The only name that mattered now was the one I'd claimed for myself. And with Logan by my side, I would never be forced to apologize for dreaming big again.